So, how do you like the new cabin of Bearing to Heaven? It's quite a glorious looking location. Actually, it's a hotel, Comfort Inn in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and we're here weathering out the hurricane that is just moving through called Dorian. And it hopefully within 24 hours will have moved on to towards Newfoundland and doing what it's doing up there, creating havoc like it did here. Uh, what's been going on? Well, at this point in time, like I said, we're weathering the storm, but just a review of the last time we were meeting together, we were talking about the events that transpired around Prince Edward Island. And one, after I got to Port Hawkesbury, after that series of incidents, I was sitting at a table with some other sailors from it's a ketch called Isabella, and we were talking about things. And the fellow across the table, the captain, was saying how he uh, was on the radio when he was off of Prince Edward Island on the Northumberland Strait, and there was a vessel that he was listening to the communications back and forth, trying to figure out whether they were in distress. And I looked across the table and said, "Hi, that would have been me." And a few minutes later, he was talking about somebody else needing a tow in, and I across the table, "Hello, that would be me." So it was pretty funny that he had listened in on the conversations that took place during that time. So what happened? Well, we got to Port Hawkesbury, as I said, and we were just after those events, and stayed a day or one night in Port Hawkesbury, and then moved on to St. Peter's in Cape Breton, because the decision was made at the time that likely we would not move down through Maine. Just the we're too late. It's that simple. We're too late. We'd be pushing hard into weather like we're getting at Dorian here. So the idea was that we would spend more time in Nova Scotia, and I was joined at St. Peter's, which is the entrance. It's a canal. 150-year celebration is taking place actually for that canal. It's a national historic site. Stayed there for 3 days, and then was joined by Dick Arnold, who is over here in the corner, and he's giving a little bit of a wave, sneaking in. There you go. Dick joined me at that point in time, was brought from Halifax by Alexander Gillis's brother-in-law. And so he joined me. We provisioned, and on a Saturday, and then Saturday later in that same day, we took off and went up and hid in behind an island called Chapel Island, which is connected to Ghost Island, a sacred area for the Mi'kmaq people, the Native Americans from this area. And it was a great place for us to locate for the night. And then, because there was a little bit of a blow coming directly onto us, so that's why we snuck in there for the night. Next day, we were just going to sail the wind in the Bredor Lakes and see where it took us. And as we were sailing back, and we started to find that we could head for Bedeck very easily, which is across the big bay. So we did, and found that we quite enjoyed Bedeck. It's a charming town. It's got all of the. It's a tourist town in many ways, but very tastefully done. It was a nice place. We enjoyed it very much for the night. And then the next day, we found the winds again favorable to us, and we sailed south back to the St. Peter Canal. And we got in late enough that we couldn't get through the canal that night. The next morning, we were the first ones through, and we sailed down to the Canso, and that was pleasant. It was a good sail. It was a short sail a day, only about 20 nautical miles or so, and stayed in a mooring ball for the night. Everything fine. Got a really early start the next day because that was a big run. It was 58 nautical miles that we had to make, and it was all worked fine, but there were good seas, and we were pushing along 6 to 7 knots. But we had to work for our keep that day, but we were able to get to let me see, which one would we get to at that point? To Spanish Ship Harbor. It's part of the Liscum River system. It's an arm that goes up, and we went up there and spent the night again on the hook because there was a lot of boats, or not a lot of boats, one, two, three. We were the fourth boat in that area. And so we spent the night there and dieseled up to give us a little bit of extra diesel and took off early the next morning and uh, made good progress that day. We got up to Shelter Cove. Shelter Cove is a wonderful little location. I'll actually pause this particular part of the video and let you have a take a peek at Shelter Cove. The Shelter Cove, beautifully protected area, just absolutely pristine Nova Scotia coastal water, just absolutely top drawer all the way around. We really enjoyed that. Uh, and actually going in and out of there, we were able to see porpoises and likely a minke whale that breached. By the shape and the coloration, I would think it was a minke. It was just a corner of the eye that I caught it, and Dick also saw the splash of the of the whale. So then the next day we were obviously all the way through here on an agenda to because we were reading hurricane reports and watching the weather as best as we could, and knew that we had one day to get back into Halifax in the Dartmouth location, and we had a good day. We had actually had two good great sailing days. The wind behaved just perfectly, and the boat behaved perfectly, and we just sailed hard and well and enjoyed it very much. Got into Halifax Harbor about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then of course when you get into Halifax, the arm it goes up a long ways, so it takes another almost 2 hours to get up the rest of the way. And we had lots of company in that particular channel that day because the hurricane was coming in. There was a NATO exercises going on outside of Halifax. They happen every couple of years, and the boats had to get out of the harbor. There was, what did we see? At least 6 or 8 military or Navy vessels, a cruise ship, all of them heading for big water because they did not. They couldn't stay in harbor because the size of the ships would just wreck all of the harbor, all of the infrastructure. So they were heading for sea, and we were in our little boat sneaking in the opposite direction. So we got in. We were able to put the boat at the Dartmouth Yacht Club on the mooring on a ball and with a bridle. So it's sitting there as we do this podcast, and it's riding out the storm. And I'm sure it's perfectly capable. It's on a good mooring, and the ball is strong, so it should be just fine. Uh, and what we're going to do next, Dick's heading out in a day or so, flying back to Iowa, and I'll be continuing, likely prepping the boat for possible sale and or storage for the winter. We're running out of the season here. Could sail more, but it'd be mostly sitting and not sailing. So it's likely time to move on for this particular part of the journey. What's coming up next? Well, a couple of ideas were kind of floating around, but nothing very definite at this point in time. But for now, this is the end of Daley Sailing, and see you in the near future.